The next sign in this series is the sign of Libra, and it should be recognized as a time of balancing. It is certainly not a spectacular sign. It is not that kind of time of the year. This is a time of balance. And that's what has to be initiated at this particular time in the cycle. We seem to have been in some kind of forward thrust, forward motion since Aries through the first half of the zodiac. That half, which is called the half which includes all of those signs which command, the commanding signs, the commanding half of the zodiac. Now we are entering the obeying half of the zodiac. The remaining 6 signs, beginning with Libra, are the signs of obeyance. The signs of conformity, the signs of social adjustment, and therefore social balancement relative to the personal self. And in terms of the Aquarian age, which we have just entered into, it is important to keep in mind that with every sign, there are 10 degrees that belong to that sign and its element. In this case it's Aquarius, and then the next 10 degrees belongs to the next air sign, which would be Gemini, and the last 10 degrees would belong to Libra, which is where we are, because we are moving from Pisces into Aquarius. So we are now in the Libran decade of the age of Aquarius. So what this means are a few things. That this decade is exoterically ruled by Venus as the exoteric ruler of Libra, which is what we are for the most part as a world consciousness engaged in. The esoteric ruler, according to certain societies, is Uranus. And in this particular time, as with every Libran time, it's good to keep in mind that we are entering ever more deeply the age of Aquarius, or the age of higher knowledge. And the way to it, in terms of social consciousness, is through the balancement of one's relationship, not to other people, but to the various levels of consciousness. Balancement in consciousness. Balancement to the lower planes of consciousness. Balancement relative to the higher planes of consciousness. So that at whatever level any individual is working at, their responsibility or sadhana of balance has to do with what they relate or realize to be the higher consciousness. Wherever you are in life, whatever your sign is, whatever your karma is, whatever appears to hold you back or thrust you forward, all of this stuff, this karmatic stuff, has to be seen relative to the balance, which is what the Libran energy is about, balancing things out. So naturally, Libra, from this viewpoint, is the most sexual of all the signs in terms of the forces. Because in Libra, the opposites balance. See? Viva la difference is what happens in Libra. Aries and in Taurus, and the other signs, you have these energies which are breaking through the consciousness or breaking through certain levels or dimensions of awareness, forcing themselves through the body, through the earth, and into manifestation. These compulsive or impulsive energies are primitive energies to some degree. They may be considered sexual energies, and they do manifest through that chakra, no question about it. For those people who are undeveloped, that's where they manifest. If you are more developed, then those energies will not manifest at that chakra. But for ordinary people, those energies manifest at that chakra. And it's the same with the sign of Libra. For undeveloped people, then they are engaged in male-female relationships. That's a big deal for them. That's where the balancement appears to be necessary, and it's a sexual balancement. It's a polarital balancement. It's not a developed level of response, necessarily. That's a beginner's level of response. That's a second chakra level of response. It is not that it is unimportant, it is important. But it should be clearly understood to be that level where the masses or the larger number of or bulk of humans operate from. So Libra is a time to balance out relations. The relationships between males and females, the relationship in terms of consciousness between the lower functions of the body and the higher functions. So we're talking about a time of integration. Now naturally there seems to be a loss of energy when we get to Libra. It's like a dead spot in the zodiac. And that is primarily because there's a reorientation happening. It is one of the equinoxial times of the year. So there's this feeling of balancement, changing of flows. So it's a critical time where this in fact occurs. The sun, as we know, traditionally falls, or it is truly weakened, not necessarily devastated, but falls in this particular sign because of the compromising, the socializing phase that this represents. So that personality and ego need to, as represented by the sun, need to be compromised. What was one is divided into two, at least, theoretically. So Libra, as a result of balance, meant, and what it implies relative to justice, as balancement and law, is a time when individuals must become responsible for what their commitments are relative to laws and disciplines. The spiritual conditions of life, as well as recognition and compliance with the social laws of life. Practitioners who are involved in spiritual communities should understand that the Libran phase is a time to very deeply consider what one's relationship is to one's spiritual life in the form of spiritual relationships, in the form of adhering to spiritual laws, disciplines, conditions, and or commitments to initiations, and or resolving relationships in society that have been karmatically consequential. So therefore Libra, which polarizes the sign of Aries, which is the sign of pushing forward and thrusting upwards and outwards, this particular time implies a balance, a harmonious, ideally harmonious balancement of everything that pertains to the self. The self as an independent, and apparently independent, motion, an action, an impulse of self-expression or assertion, and so on. So a major key word is reorientation. So time to, in terms of the physical body, reorient oneself to the most appropriate level of balancement, and working with chemical balance. Especially because the Libran energy is the cardinal phase that sets at least this hemisphere up for the storms of the winter coming. So this is a time to really put the past into perspective relative to the season. The warm phase has passed. We're at the autumn phase, and we are going to be using this phase to prepare for the winter phase, the cold phase. For the developed being, this phase is the phase of balancement, harmony, and even peace, which are sort of remotely related to Libra. Because as each knows, this time of the year is also, from a historic viewpoint, one of the most conducive times for battles and for international conflicts. Fighting for peace, or fighting and struggling for balancement. One other note on this time of the year, rather than this particular sign, but just this time, call it what you want, whether it's Libra or Zebra, anything you want, this time of the year is a time to consider what direction individuals are going in. Whether they will move forward into the inferno of purification as indicated by the sign coming of Scorpio, or move backwards into the sign of Virgo and discrimination as a result of not having learned the lesson of balancement in this particular time. And once again, the idea of mankind or the solar system being in the Venusian or Libran decadent of the sign of Aquarius, or the age of Aquarius. Which implies, from the Aquarian viewpoint, artistic work of a high order, harmony through knowledge, and enlightenment through absolute realization of what balancement is about. Balancement in the sense of communion, oneness, not in the idea of being an opposite to anything else, but being one. That is balancement. Balancement implies not having any other, not wanting or desiring any other. People who bring desire into Libra, relational and sexual desire into this sign or time, are those who are moving backwards through the signs. They're bringing that in from Scorpio. They're not moving forward, they're moving backwards. Those who are in this sign and in this time and realize that they must move forward into the fire of purification and regenerative practice are those who are progressing.